and welcome to Sinbin. We're here to dissect the disciplinary issues in the world of rugby league. My name is Rod Studd, welcome along. And alongside me, a familiar face, Paul Cullen, the head of the match review panel. And it's a warm welcome, making his Sinbin debut, to Dave Rotherham. Hi Dave. Viewers may well remember Dave playing the sport of rugby league and coaching at High Level 2 Scotland and St Helens, Dave. And you're now the Chief On-Field Officer of the Rugby Football League. Just very quickly, what does that mean for people who maybe haven't heard that term?
Yeah, it's a very wide-ranging role, Rod. It covers everything that's on the field, so from game development to match officials, right up to the three England teams that will trot out next week in the mid-season internationals. Rightio.
OK, let's get cracking because there's a lot to get stuck into here, including action from the Challenge Cup final. Let's start, though, with a match between Bradford and Newcastle. Paul, this is your remit here. This degenerated into some chaotic scenes here, which had ended up in two lengthy bans for two players.
Well, here we are with Tom Holroyd and Craig Mullen at the play of the ball. Nothing more than a push and a shove. Then watch, bang, bang. There's two punches. Mullen throws one back and misses. And we have Tom Holroyd now throwing multiple punches at different people. And, you know, text one in the back of the side of the head from Jake Shorrocks. You know, so that's very, very difficult for match officials to try and work out what's happened because there was no build-up to that. It was quite innocuous. It was, when I said a push and shove, that's an over-exaggeration. There was some kind of some problem. Bang, look at the right. You know, and then people come in to try and hold. There's a knocked a player to the floor. There's one punch. There's a next one. And if you just look at Jake Shorrocks, runs in and punches. Not a clenched fist, direct contact with the head, but throws a swinging arm, catches him with some part of the forearm. Yeah. So Tom Holroyd instantly given unanimously on the match review a grade F and sent up before the judge on the Tuesday night. There is nothing higher. Yeah. If we had a grade Z, we might have put that one on it. Right. You've only got grade F. And then Shorrocks, who only threw one punch, well, he has committed at some point, arguably even worse offence of running into a melee and punching somebody that can't defend himself. Yeah. So not that I'm saying Tom Holroyd's done anything right, because he clearly hasn't in that, but he's fighting with people who are front on, and Shorrocks has run in and hit someone from behind. So two players sent up on the highest charge that we've got, which is grade F.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here, Paul, because there'll be people sitting here watching this, probably my age or your age, and think, oh, hang on a minute, Paul Cullen. Now, Paul Cullen was involved in the odd incident that were fairly similar to this back in the day. You know, is it really that bad? It's almost part of the game, or it was when you were playing. Why is there such a difference now as we sit here in 2022 to 1982?
Because we have greater medical evidence about the effects of concussion. You will get contact to the head in a game of rugby league. It's unavoidable. Yeah. What the game wants is unavoidable contact to the head, violent striking of an opponent to the head. You never could do it anyway, but somehow it was seen to be tolerated in the game in the day. Well, it's not that day anymore, no. And people are suffering very, very badly from concussions, and the evidence suggests that the game needs to reduce the unnecessary and avoidable contact to the head. Punching and running in and punching is absolutely outlawed. Now, the players know that because I've gone round to the clubs and told them. The coaches know that. Don't let anyone say they don't know that is not acceptable in the modern game. It wasn't acceptable then, but it was tolerated somewhat. That's over, long gone. Yeah. And I'm really proud to be a part of that.
Yeah. This isn't easy to referee on the field, though, Dave, is it? Because, I mean, you know, as my friend and colleague Steve used to say, you know, Holroyd lost the plot there completely, didn't he? I mean, that's chaotic. It's very difficult. A referee needs to be like either an owl or eyes in the back of his head with his head spinning around trying to see what the heck's going on. It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we've got to pay tribute to the on-field match officials, you know, the referee and both touch judges, the way they dealt calmly with that, decisively, and issued two red cards during the game. And, you know, that incident started on the try line, ended on the 20-metre line, and they did everything correctly. And like Paul says, you know, we want to eradicate that type of deliberate act from the game for those reasons Paul articulated. And you know, I sit as a member of the Rugby League Laws Committee, and that's got three remits really: to keep the game safe, entertaining, and fair. And I think, you know, what we've seen there with those graded bans handed out, that's a big deterrent to others.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's a 10-match ban there for Holroyd and a 5-match for Shorrocks. Those are big, long, lengthy bans, and you know we don't see that kind of incident very often anymore. So you have to assume, based on that evidence, that the deterrent does work.
Oh, well, I absolutely think it does. And there's a point in there that Jake Shorrocks was charged at grade F. Automatically, both players are going up on Tuesday night to the ORT, and we had the pleasure of sitting in with the Right Honourable Judge Roger Thomas in the last session. So this isn't Dave Rotherham giving 5 games and 10 games, or Ralph Rimmer or Paul Cullen. This is the judge in his wisdom and his expertise, and he actually dropped the grade F on Shorrocks to the grade E because he made contact with a swinging arm somewhere around the forearm and not a clear direct punch to the head. I completely accept that, and so does everyone else. That's the judge in his wisdom delivering his verdict. And we don't really care, to be honest, and I'll say that very fairly, whether Tom Holroyd gets 10 games as he did, or he gets 20 games, or he gets 8 games. That's the judge independently on the day, in his wisdom, delivering his verdict. Both players and both clubs accepted the punishment, and hopefully lessons learned.
Yeah, we heard, as you mentioned there from Roger in our last session on Sinbin, it was most informative, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's that big incident dealt with that caused a lot of discussion and debate, particularly on social media, and they always do. And this incident we're going to see now did, certainly in the Challenge Cup final, which was an absolutely fantastic game, wasn't it, at Tottenham? Won by Wigan in the last couple of minutes when Huddersfield looked like they had it in the bag. But the incidents we're going to talk about, well, there was a couple of incidents here involving Morgan Smithies of Wigan. And he's ended up being banned by the match review panel. And of course, there was a lot of debate after should he have been sinbin by the referee on the day, which was James Child, and he had the assistance of Chris Kendall, who was video refereeing, I think I'm right in saying, in that match, wasn't he?
Yeah, there's that swinging arm from Morgan Smithies making contact, direct contact with the head of Joel Greenwood. And for us, there's a that player's vulnerable. He's held in a tackle and he's going down, and that swinging forearm hits him directly in the face. So we charge that at grade C. Then there's a second one later in the game. And there's on Ricky Latelli, there's the swinging right arm. That tackle is active, it's moving, but he's thrown a reckless arm. It kind of bounces just off Latelli's hand, but then hits him in the face. And we charge that one at slightly less at grade B. Now, Wigan and Morgan Smithies plead guilty to that, but look at the speed that was happening in real time. And he's quite clearly thrown a reckless swinging arm. It wasn't a clenched fist, it was an open hand, but both reckless swinging arms, and both one making direct and then indirect contact with the head. So the first one charged at grade C, Morgan Smithies didn't have form to get into a 3-game penalty notice. Obviously, Rod, we don't give him 3 games, we just charge him at grade C, and he pleaded guilty, he got 2 games. On the second one, charged at grade B, 1 or 2 game penalty notice attached to it. He gets the high end because he's grade C from earlier on in the game in chronological order, added up to he's now got sufficient form to get the high end of a charge.
Right, so just to stress, Paul, the previous form, as you just described it there, can come from within the same game, not a few weeks before.
It's chronological order, so nothing dissimilar to you're driving on the M6 and you go through a speed camera at 90 and a 70, and then you go through another one at 90 and a 70, then another one at 90 at 70. Your third one's got you 9 points because you've done 3 separate incidents and they're dealt with in chronological order.
Yeah, and so you can be banned from driving for one stretch of road, can't you?
Absolutely, and Morgan Smithies, unfortunate that day, committed 2 offences. His first one was within his 2-year limit for not having more than 2 offences in that period. But when he pleaded guilty to the first incident, that then automatically means his top end of another charge. Unfortunately for him, he did it in the same game.
Now, if anyone from Greater Manchester Police is watching, Paul Cullen drives at 68 miles per hour on the motorway, I've seen him, and 28 miles per hour in the 30 miles, I've seen him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. OK, now the thing here with this is that the Smithies incident, there are people who would say, and they would have to have a point, Dave, that's all well and good. What Paul said there, and Morgan Smithies is going to get a 2-match ban. And, I found Matty Peake's comments quite refreshing over this season. When a player has been banned, he said, yeah, we accept that, he's done wrong and we need to be better.
Yes. Which
is quite refreshing. But and he said so again after the cup final. But people who support Huddersfield or maybe backed Huddersfield would say, well, hang on, this is ludicrous. He's got a 2-match ban, so the match review panel is saying, it's an offence. So why wasn't he sin-binned on the day? Do they have a case there, Dave, to argue that point?
Look, the match review panel isn't there to critique the performance of match officials. No, and that is done. I oversee that department, and it's done very, very diligently. The critical evaluation of referees' performances with their coaches, and on that occasion, you can see there's certainly that second incident where we're in the last few minutes of a cup final. Great commitment from Ricky Latelli, running down the field. Morgan Smithies from back row late in the game. He's got back and made that tackle and got it wrong. But you see there that everyone's up on their feet straight away, and we want to keep the game flowing. And in hindsight, maybe that it could have been a sinbin. And hindsight's a very exact science, isn't it?
It is.
But I said
even
before,
I get things right afterwards.
and in terms of keeping the game safe, fair, and entertaining, we did that at the beginning of the year. There was, I think you would have discussed it on this show.
We did, yeah.
At the first couple of ones that you did, that we had at the beginning of the season a spate of red cards, yellow cards, which in the main were correct. But then we met with the club CEOs, the club coaches, and look, and where there is doubt, then they'll just keep the game flowing and come down. So
those decisions
it's that fine balance,
are a product of the review that you mentioned earlier in the season, when there was, as you rightly said, there was a furore about yellow cards and bans, long bans and suspensions. And the other side of the view is there are people who say, well, just carry on, plough on, keep issuing bans and get to the end of the road. But I mean, you've got to try and balance things, haven't you? You're walking a tightrope as the governing body.
It's the three independent panels, David, completely independent organisations, match officials, match review, in the cold light of day. Now, in both of those incidents, we took 30 minutes to come up with our grade C and our grade B. If it wasn't for the replays, a 360 review, slow-mo, you can really miss those two incidents.
I mean, James Child hasn't got 30 minutes, and even Chris Kendall watching it as the video referee hasn't. I mean, people say, well, the video referee, why doesn't he pick it up? Because he hasn't got 30 minutes, that's why.
And they were not given the 360
No,
view.
you're not.
If we don't get the reverse angle views of that slow motion, that's in the blink of an eye. It's missed. This works. Cold light of day. So let's say he'd hit him in the shoulder and not hit him in the head, and James Child sees something and sends him off. Well, the cup final's ruined. Yeah,
and James Child gets the blame.
Leave it to us. If there's any element of doubt, leave it to us on a Monday morning when we've got a sterile environment, unemotional.
Yes.
There's not 100,000 people shouting. We're not sweating. We're not out of breath. There's not a game depending on it.
No.
And I must say that both Matty Pete and Ian Watson, mate, they're very, very detailed. So when I ring up Matty Pete to let him know that his player has been charged, he wants all the detail, and I give him all the detail. Yeah. Then he accepts it like a professional and a gentleman. And Ian Watson the same, because the same thing happened in the same game with a Huddersfield player.
Yeah, come on, Dan, just a sec, because I just want to ask this, because people talk about they don't get sinbin or sent off in a cup final. I don't know what's going through a referee's head at the time. I don't even know what's going through my own head half the time, but. You have to go right back to 2001 for the last player to be sinbin in the cup final. That was Shane Riggin, playing for Bradford against Saints. Russell Smith was the man brandishing the yellow card. Richie Ayres got sent off in the 1993 cup final, which I remember. I was at that, Widnes versus Wigan. And in the grand final, we saw the first sinbining last year, in 2021, when Tommy Makinson got a yellow card against Catalans for Saints. And the famous, or infamous if you prefer, incident when Ben Flower got red carded in 2014. Sent off for punching Lance Hahaya. So these are rare incidents in cup finals. So is it fair to say that referees take a slightly more lenient view in cup finals, Dave, to allow the game to flow and be more entertaining? Is that fair to say, or are people misguided in thinking that?
I think that they want to referee the game by the laws of the game and within the policies that are set down at a particular time. You've talked across a 30-year stretch there, Rod. And I thought James handled the cup final brilliantly. That we had a great entertaining spectacle that got to the last few minutes. You didn't know who was going to win. No. Which was great, and the balance was probably right. So I'd like to think that he's done a great job within the policies of the sport at this moment in time.
Okay, let's just move on. I think Paul was alluding to it earlier. Luke Yates of the Huddersfield Giants within that very same cup final.
Yes, sometimes, Rob, you can't script this, but here's Luke Yates. Late hitting a passer there on Craig Cust. So he's charged at grade A. So Cust goes up and over, passes the ball, clearly gone, hits him in the back and doesn't tackle him. He just hits him in the back and causes flexion of head, neck and spinal column. Referee didn't see that because it was that fast and that tight. So charged at grade A. Later in the game, here's Luke Yates coming into a tackle on Liam Farrell. And it's not dissimilar to the second Morgan Smithies tackle that was charged at grade B. There it is. Blink of an eye, very, very difficult to see. Liam Farrell obviously appears injured. He's caught one, by the look of that one, in the face. Naked eye, you find it very, very difficult to work out. And that's what he's done. He's come in, he's swung the left arm, it's direct contact, just watch it. It goes right over the top of Liam Farrell's hand and hits him directly in the side of the face. It's a reckless high tackle and charged at grade B. So we'll go back to that chronological order.
Yes.
But Luke Yates has a very, very reasonable record, very, very clear and clean player. However, he's got one thing on his record in the last 2 years. So charged at grade A, which he pleaded guilty to, he gets a 0-game penalty notice when I speak to Ian Watson on the Monday morning.
Right, yeah, I get it.
So he then pleads guilty, or Ian Watson does on his behalf, once they've considered that. The second challenge that he's been charged at grade B carries 1 or 2. Because he's now got the grade A and his previous one, he's crossed the threshold in terms of his form, and he now gets high-end a 2-match penalty notice for the second offence. So, same thing about the speed cameras.
Yeah.
If he hadn't done the grade A, you'd have got a B1 for the second one. But you've done it in the same game. You've now got that on your form.
Yeah. So it's important to remember that the chronological factor can be applied to the same game, which is something that I've certainly learned today.
Quite, and the irony of it's happened to Wigan in the same game, and it's happened to Huddersfield in the same game. And the conversations with Ian Watson are very, very detailed. He wants to know what his players have not to do to get a charge.
Yeah.
Well, that one with Luke Yates is, I mean, it was open hand. They're not clenched fist attacking the head.
Yeah.
He's been reckless because his arm was going up and always going up.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable you're going to hit the head of an opponent. You certainly have to make that contact with your shoulder around the torso.
Yeah.
So Luke Yates will learn from that. Ian Watson has learned from that.
Okay.
Gentlemanly, they accepted the charge and pleaded guilty.
Okay, great. Well, there was a lot of debate, so thanks for clearing it up, Paul. And thanks, Dave, also, yeah. But the one thing there was no debate about was that was an absolutely belting Challenge Cup final, and one that will live long in the memory, particularly if you're a supporter of Wigan. And unfortunately not so for Huddersfield. Well, it'll live long in the memory, but for the wrong reasons for Huddersfield, and maybe those two teams will be challenging in the grand final later in the season as the season develops here in the Betfred Super League. Okay, thanks, Paul, head of the match review panel, joining us once more, and thanks to Dave Rotherham for being here and explaining so many things as well, Dave. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks to our guests, and thanks to you for watching. We'll be here with our regular monthly instalment of the Sinbin. We'll be back in about 4 weeks' time, so keep an eye out on the Rugby League social media channels for when we're next on with the next episode of Sinbin. But until then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.